The poem we're starting with is called the Three Dark Angels. And it sort of gives you, especially if you're dropping in for the first time, give you a little idea of grief and despair and fear from the point of view of the questions that they're asking. These are also dark angels, not just because they involve pain and they involve cognitive darkness because we're not taught how to handle these emotions, but they're dark also because they don't tell us the answer. They ask us questions, each one with a unique question. So here's the poem, and this will be printed out on Monday as usual. If you want to take another look at it, if it's worth it. Three Dark Angels. Fear, grief, and despair are three dark angels, and each blesses you with their own question. Fear, grief, and despair are three dark angels, and each blesses you with their own unique question. The dark angel of fear asks you, can you open your heart and take wise and compassionate action whenever and however life is threatened? That's the question of the dark angel of fear. Can you open your heart and then take wise and compassionate action whenever or however life is threatened? We'll double back on all of these, but just to give you a sense. The dark angel of grief asks you, will you make a pilgrimage to the wild edge of sorrow to honor and mourn all your losses? Will you make a pilgrimage to the wild edge of sorrow to honor and mourn all your losses? And the dark angel of despair asks you, what must you sacrifice to follow your soul and love the world in the way you're meant to love it? The dark angel of despair asks you, what must you sacrifice to follow your soul and love the world in the way you're meant to love it? If you can befriend these dark emotions, feel their energy in your body, and listen deeply to their questions, you will ripen slowly and mysteriously into a joyful, grateful, soulful human being. If you can befriend these dark emotions and feel their energy in your body and listen deeply to their unique questions, you will ripen. You will ripen slowly and mysteriously into a joyful, grateful, soulful human being. Yeah. So let's just pop back and just touch on a couple things. First of all, I read this, and this is just my experience, plus what I learned from Miriam in just dealing with all these myself. Each comes, they bless you with, the Zen guides would say they bless you with a koan. They bless you with a deep question that has to be answered from the deepest part of your consciousness, which we call around here the heart. So the dark angel of fear, one we've just been working on, it really asks you. I gave one image yesterday that might be helpful. That the dark angel of fear, the emotion of fear, is like a smoke alarm. It goes off when there's danger, when your life's threatened. You know, you won't want to disable your smoke alarm. It can save your life, and so can fear. Fear asks you, can you open your heart? And then, you know, to feel it, you've got to open, you've got to go into the body, and then the heart will feel the depths of the fear. And then if you can do that, and that's the trick, we're going to double back with the practice after, because part of the problem with being able to open up and feel fear fully is it's such a powerful emotion. It's the most powerful of the three emotions. Plus, it's the most shamed of all the three emotions. And so there's a great resistance to feeling it. And we talk in the talk, if you go back and listen to yesterday's talk, you'll find out what the just the toxic nature of repressing the emotions, of bypassing the emotions, especially fear, but all of them really, and how it doesn't work. You'll learn a little bit about repression and how it leads to just unhealthy things in everybody's life, physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally. Okay. So the dark angel of fear is asking you, can you open your heart, feel this fully in the body, open your heart, and then wait until you know there's a wise and compassionate way to respond. Whenever and however life is threatened, fear comes up when life is threatened, your own individual, like physical existence, life of the people you love, life of a democracy, life of the planet. We're going to talk, we'll get bigger next week, because that's what ecology does. It connects everything to everything. But at least, you know, starting with your own physical existence, that's where it starts. Okay. So it's asking you, can you feel it? Can you then open your heart? Heart is where you'll understand. We talked about reacting, acting out, which is not ever helpful. We talked about the ways that men and women, when you repress emotion, can later act them out to much harm for everybody. So this is a challenge, and it's about, can you hear the smoke alarm and then take wise and compassionate action for the sake of life. Now, the first one we talked about back in September was the dark angel of grief. Well, what is that asking you? It's asking you, will you make a pilgrimage? These are all pilgrim. These all are talking about a kind of pilgrimage, inner pilgrimage, and inner Camino that we have to do, because they all have. You have to go inside to really transform them. See, and but grief really says, will you take a pilgrimage to the wild edge of sorrow and mourn all your losses? Yesterday, one of our participants said very wisely, we all lose stuff. We all have the sorrow of that. What we do with it, if you're actually consciously going to work with it, that's what we call mourning. And there's a lot of unmourned losses, and that becomes toxic. If you don't mourn them, you cannot escape them. And so that was a key little, a great thing that I picked up yesterday, that just the difference between grieving and mourning. We're all grieving, even when you repress it all. It's being grieved at some low level, but it's not doing you any good. It's actually doing you quite a bit of harm. It can toxify into deep regret. It can toxify into holding a grudge for your whole life. You know, feud, Sunni versus Shia, you know, all this kind of stuff. Yeah, everybody loses stuff, but not everybody mourns it. And so it's saying, are you willing to take this pilgrimage? And it is a pilgrimage to the wild edge of sorrow, because you can't control the process. It's wild. And you have to sorrow, you know, to mourn all your losses. That's a good question. That is the question of grief. And then despair, which was our middle one, we worked at last in during October, the dark angel of despair. Well, what's that asking you? It's asking you about sacrifice. What must you sacrifice to follow your soul? You know, to even listen to what the soul wants, you know, to actually pick up the direction from the soul is something we've pretty much totally lost in this culture. Even psychologists, psyche, the Greek word was the word for soul. So psychology should be the study of the soul. And, you know, you rarely hear the word, you know, used. and where it's understood. So what must we sacrifice to follow your soul and love the world in the way you're meant to love it? This is very old teaching. Uh, one of the oldest teaching before electronic media, before electricity, you know, ancient people would look up at the stars at night. The night sky was, late night TV, and they would make up stories about the constellations but one of the major stories that most first peoples had was a beautiful one was that there's a star for every one of us. There's a destination. Destiny comes from the word for star. We're not just a random. No. Primitive first peoples thought this was a random affair. That's a postmodern thing. We're just atoms floating around. We last for a while, and it's all random. No first peoples thought that, and no deep contemplative traditions think that. We have a destiny. We're meant to do something with this life. And so they said there's a star for every one of us. In other words, and the word destino, destiny, comes from the word for star. So, but we must sacrifice. What must you sacrifice to actually follow your soul and love the world the way you're meant to love it? Nobody even asked you that question. Well, despair does. And when you're feeling despair, which is a kind of whole body numbness and a feeling of loss of direction, or the feeling of what's the point, maybe we've all been there at some time. And then if you don't know what to do with that, that can get very deep. That's actually where we go. You're listening to the talk, which is hopefully going to be encouraging to do all this stuff. It's encouraging. You're giving you courage to do it. And sacrifice takes courage. What must you sacrifice to follow your soul? In this culture, which is a pretty soulless culture, to sacrifice something. And then finally, to love the world in the way you're meant to love it. Even think about that the wisdom traditions are saying, you have a certain unique skill set here, a certain gift, a way to love the world. I wrote a poem years ago, 20 years ago, I guess. It's What Matters. And it's such a short poem, I can recite it from heart because it came out of the heart. Doesn't matter. This is called What's Matter. It doesn't matter if the world chooses to accept or reject your act of love. Doesn't matter if the world chooses to accept or reject your act of love. It only matters that you love the world in the way you're meant to love it. I mean, look at Van Gogh. 10,000 paintings, finally. Nobody appreciated him. They threw rocks at him when he was out painting. They thought he was a weirdo, But he persisted. He tried being a preacher, by the way, like his dad. He was actually too Christian. They wouldn't accept him. Then he tried to do like his brother, working in the art thing in Paris. That wasn't what he was meant to do. Finally, he knew what he was meant to do, what his soul wanted to do, his unique gift, painting. The local painters said, you need to take art lessons to Van Gogh. He not only did they not accept it, they ridiculed what he did. He kept going. He's the model of that. And he paid the price. He sacrificed a lot for it, even his sanity at some points, because people were so negative to him. So now if you can work with these things, the last two lines, you will ripen slowly and mysteriously into a joyful, grateful, soulful human being. This is the whole point of existence on this plane, is to become a true human being that is joyful, grateful, and soulful. if you met one of those persons who has even one of those things that change your life, you meet a truly joyful person, grief, uh, fear transformed turns into joy. If you've even met a really truly grateful person, Brother David Stendelross, gratefulness.org. I actually met the guy. I actually got to hug him one time. He's just grateful. Changes you. And then when you meet people who are soulful, they just, they're obviously following their own path. Not your path. Maybe you don't understand the path, but they're following. They found their way to bless the world. Yeah. Imagine if we all found, imagine if we had 6 billion people who were taught that, hey, it's your job to find your way to bless the world and the planet, and we'll support you in that. Imagine if we had governments who said, yeah, find your way to bless the world and we'll support you. If you're going to paint, you're going to paint. We'll support you. Think about what a government could do if it actually had this kind of approach, see. All right. Yeah. Yeah. So these dark angels have these questions, and the Hasidic Jews, it's in the Talmud, they say over every blade of grass, angels hover, and they whisper, grow, grow. So this idea that there are forces in the world that are constantly whispering the message you need to grow as a human being, to ripen as a human being. That's Jesus's key metaphor in the Beatitudes when you read it in Aramaic. We're organic. We're not machines, and we can ripen in the right conditions. See, listening to these dark angels, listening to these advocates, really, to become a total human being. It's a long process where you can't force ripening, you see. Well, all right. I think that's enough for the recorded talk. Thanks for listening.